every now and again, my wife's Tourette's will sneak up on her and she'll just blurt shit out. So like we're laying in bed the other day and she was like, oh man, I'm so glad I got out of that relationship. It was like the best thing I ever did. Talking about one of her previous romantic relationships.
I thought she was dreaming, and in her dream she was thinking about you.
Probably more. Now that I think about it, that makes more sense. Honey, you were having a dream. No, and then there's this long pause and like I don't really know what to say to that. So then I just said, so marrying me was the second best thing, I guess, in your life? She just kind of laughs. And I was like,
you're on the list. You're on the list somewhere.
I'm glad I made the cut.
Quiet, please.
Glad I made the cut.
In 4, 3, 2.
Company presents a truly terrible podcast. Welcome to Nonsense Season 3, Episode 2. I'm Jeff Parker.
I'm Stu Little.
This is our take on the week's business, tech, and entertainment headlines. This time, we'll take a look at our crazy experiences with Los Angeles on fire.
Wait, what? It's on fire? I should really go outside more.
It's National Fig Newton Day. Fig Newtons came into existence in the 19th century when physicians began to promote an increase in biscuits and fruit in one's diet as a remedy for digestive problems. In 1891, Charles Roser invented a machine to insert fig paste into dough. After several business deals, the fig roll became a product of Nabisco, and the name was changed to Fig Newton.
I'm really surprised they got away from fig roll because, that's just such a wonderful name, National Fig Roll Day.
Well, that's probably like a generic name, and so they couldn't, trademark it or something. Who knows?
Sure.
When I was a kid, they had this irresistibly catchy ad jingle that James Harder, who was this fabulous ad pitchman, he did thousands of ads, sang, and these ads were complete earworms. I can still recite the lyrics 50 plus years later. That's how good they were.
That's pretty impressive. Those are just like synapses you've lost to time, right? Because they're going to be forever burnt with the Fig Newton jingle.
No, I'm happy these are still in my synapses. Ooey gooey, rich and chewy inside, tender flaky, golden cakey outside. I won't bore you with my singing.
That's pretty good. I feel like we should do a singing segment on this show.
It's joyous. It's totally joyous.
I guess if you are going to give up synapses to anything, that's probably a better thing to give it up to.
Sure.
Meanwhile, I can recount most of the ASCII table from 127 to 255. Maybe those are synapses I should probably reclaim.
But can you sing it with such charm? Come on.
No, but I always remember the ASCII character for Bell, because whenever somebody has they built their own input bullshit, I have to throw the Bell character at it and watch all hell break loose.
Sure.
That doesn't work as much anymore as it used to. But
how's your week going?
My week has been interesting. It has been unlike any other week that I've had. As you alluded to earlier, there have been a lot of fires going on, several fires in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
I have been really unable to focus on anything other than LAFD radio traffic and airplane ADS-B transponders, looking at where they're flying.
For good reason.
Yeah. So I have, because of all of this, there's been an incredible increase in airplane traffic over my house.
Yeah.
So I have countless number of pictures, terrible pictures of the underside of airplanes. I have a whole bunch of shitty photos.
Because they fly so low, these enormously huge
they're like
planes.
1,500 feet over my house.
It's crazy.
And they're DC-10s and MD-87s and all this crazy stuff. The worst part is I go out and I'm like, these are terrible photos. Like, why am I even pressing the shutter button? But whatever. This is, hopefully never going to happen again.
Sure.
And then it comes back around in like another 25 seconds and I'm doing the same. I run back outside and take more pictures and I'm like, why am I doing this? To the same shitty photos. Every now and again, I'll get a little wingtip or something that, they'll tip over, but it was incredible to see. So we did end up having to evacuate over the weekend.
Yeah.
Fortunately, the team's got a hold on the fire. We are back. We are safe. We're still under a evacuation warning zone. However, we expect that will be lifted likely later today or tomorrow.
I'm going to ask you all about that later on, yeah.
Yeah, sure. How about you? How's your week been?
I spent my week also with my face buried into watch duty and the wind forecast. We'll put the links in the show notes for both of those things. Wind is terribly important in these issues. The wind can be deadly if it picks up and really gets going in the LA basin. But that hasn't happened since Tuesday. The wind has been very cooperative. It's been 5 miles an hour and 1 mile an hour, which is great, knock wood.
Yeah.
We had people staying at our house, which was nice. Not nice for them because they were evacuated, but lovely for us.
Sure.
Anytime we can be of assistance to anyone and make so little effort, count me in, because it was absolutely joyous having friends stay with us when they needed to.
Of course. I appreciate you offering for my family to come over and stay. I didn't realize that it was either not for the kids or only for the kids. I couldn't decide which you were. You were like, well, maybe just the kids. Maybe they, and I was like, do they stay outside? You're like, no. You just drop them off. We want to hang out with them. You go get a hotel. All right. Fine.
We like your kids. We love your kids.
Yeah, sure.
I am sick and tired of weathermen intentionally making LA County sound like LA City. It's to make their forecast sound more dramatic. Deadly winds are coming to Los Angeles. Well, no, they're coming to the top of LA County. It's not the same thing as when they cut through the basin.
Yeah, I mean, LA County, I'll give them a little pass on LA County. Where I get grumpy is when they, the Los Angeles Angels of Los Angeles, the Anaheim, whatever.
Really stretch the boundaries of it,
okay, you're in a different fucking county at that point.
Right.
But I do think generally most people think like Los Angeles starts somewhere around Bakersfield and goes all the way down to San Diego. Like that's just all Los Angeles is how most people I think of that. I'm sure we're going to get plenty of hate mail from our fine friends in Orange County about how they are the Orange Curtain. But Los Angeles does seem to be pretty wide and deep.
It definitely gets stretched for dramatic purposes on the news. I'm also tired of GoFundMes from people who don't need them.
Yeah, of course. I saw you guys set one up.
Yeah. We ran out of soy sauce. I was having sushi and I ran out of soy sauce. And I knew my wife was going to come home later and have sushi. And so I didn't want her to find out that we were out of soy sauce. Then I wanted to tell her.
Sure.
So I text her and I say, we're out of soy sauce.
Yeah.
And she replied back, I'll start a GoFundMe.
Which, by the way, it's already got like $3,000 in it. I mean, good work.
You know.
You can keep them on for days. Yeah, no, I know. It's tough. It detracts from the folks that actually do need it and benefit from it. So,
yes.
Yeah. I have been impressed, though. We'll talk about this more later, but the amount of the turnout from the community at large to support people who have lost everything has been nothing short of amazing.
Yeah.
For folks who have, turned out with clothes and suitcases and water and food. And
it's been amazing. It has been amazing. The generosity of people is just fantastic. I am gone next week, so we will not be having a show. Everybody enjoy your week off.
Would have been great for you to align your travel schedule with the most intense disaster we've ever had in Los Angeles.
So I would have been gone for that?
Maybe next time.
Is that what you want?
Well, I would have liked to have not recorded while running away from the fires. But I don't, our listeners deserve better.
Sure.
I don't know what that better is, but this is what they've got.
Let's get to our headlines.
Let's do it.
Is this the end of TikTok in the U.S.? Well, maybe.
Yay!
TikTok reportedly plans immediate Sunday shutdown in the U.S. if it's banned.
Man, if this ain't the cut off your nose to spite your face move, I don't know what is.
I don't know. This seems like politically the right thing to do. This is exactly how to draw attention to the fact that you've been banned.
I am assuming they are threatening this, right? Just to put pressure from the constituents to go call their congressman.
You don't think they'll follow through?
I don't know what the advantage of them following through would be. I mean, maybe they follow through for a while to just, again, put more pressure on, but this isn't what was asked. What was asked was that they just are removed from the App Store.
No, of course, but they want to put political pressure on. They want to show you this is what it's like when you don't have TikTok.
But at some point, that political pressure translates into loss of revenue, right? If you actually turn it off. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. Maybe you ratchet up the pressure by actually turning it off and following through.
Yeah.
And then at some point acquiescing, even if you don't get what you want. But we will see. It's interesting.
Because I mean, the Supreme Court at any point could jump in and change things. But right now, it's very entertaining watching this game of chicken.
I mean, I would argue that there's a lot of interest in them actually shutting down and this ban being enforced because you got all sorts of rumors of folks that are going to, pick it up or help them divest, right? Especially Uncle Elon. So we'll see.
Everybody keeps saying, Mr. Wonderful. Everybody keeps wanting to jump on the bandwagon and say, we'll buy it. We want to buy it. So far, ByteDance has said, we're not selling.
Yeah.
China, by the way, has okayed Elon Musk buying it or something like that. Again, ByteDance is like, we don't want to sell. We'll go dark.
I mean, China usually is pretty smart and savvy on these sorts of things. They should be like, look, okay, we'll let you buy TikTok, but you've got to buy a bunch of this other garbage on Temu as well at the same time. Like they just bolt on a bunch of other crap that they want to dump. It's just like really poorly made, knockoff whatever, and then it's okay. I would assume, I don't know, I haven't really thought about this, but I would assume the PRC, if they wanted to sell to anybody, it would be a guy like Elon because they'd love to be in his good graces a little more.
Well, that's exactly it. They want to suck up to the administration.
Of course, so why not?
That's their interest, yes. It's not necessarily ByteDance's interest.
Yeah. I mean, it'll be interesting to see if what's that TikTok competitor, I think it's called Ice, the one that's the Greenland put out. Be interesting to see.
I haven't seen that.
I think it's called Ice.
I missed that.
Yeah. Cold.
Meta says it will end fact-checking as Silicon Valley prepares for Trump.
Oh, yeah.
Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg announced Tuesday that the social media company, which owns Facebook and Instagram, would stop working with third-party fact-checking organizations.
So this is fascinating to me. Zuck seems to have, I wouldn't say replaced, but instead of the moral compass that you hope most people have,
Sure.
he seems to have this like moral compass that looks more like a weather vane and just like sort of blows with the wind.
Sure.
So I totally appreciate this. I mean, I'm assuming this is a wise move for their stockholders, at least short term,
yes.
Because it's going to shave a bunch of costs off. It's going to keep them, I guess, somewhat relevant. I'm really torn on this because while I think generally speaking, it's good to have some modicum of moderation, it certainly wasn't perfect. I do think it's better than the general masses, but I feel like the real answer is to just get off it. And that might be what he's helped achieve. He pushed a lot of people out of Meta products by doing this.
Yeah, I don't know. If you were getting your news from Facebook anyway,
But you are.
you were in trouble to begin with.
But there's a huge percentage percentage of the population that is getting their news from social media, from Facebook, from Instagram. I mean, this has become so much clearer to me in the past 2 weeks during the LA fires.
Yeah.
I've had so many people message me stuff that even with just a modicum of research, you realize is not true. And there's been so much misinformation spreading around. And I didn't understand why. And then I realized, oh, fuck, people are getting their news, quote unquote. They're treating accurate information as what comes in from social media.
Okay, enough of the headlines. Up next, we're going to debrief on our LA wildfire experiences.
I think it's not really a debrief. It's more of like a mid-brief. It's more of like a brief. What is it? It's like, is there an underwear analogy here? Like, it's
Was
like
I just being optimistic?
The boxers and briefs. It's like a mid-rise brief.
It's a mid-rise brief.
Yes, you are being extremely optimistic. I would love to debrief on the thing that's not done yet. Sure, let's try.
With the fires, I'm done. Let's wrap it up. Let's be done. I want it over.
Our listeners might be done. Like, enough of the fire talk already.
But first, did you know most networks gobble up huge amounts of RAM?
Oh, yeah.
So much RAM, in fact, you might not be able to run important programs such as word processors, databases, and spreadsheets. Artisoft's LANtastic changes all of that. LANtastic network operating system uses an amazingly tiny amount of RAM, less than 40 kilobytes on a server and under 12 kilobytes on a workstation, the smallest RAM of any network. And it still delivers DOS 3.1 file and record locking, CD-ROM support, NetBIOS compatibility, and much more. Build your network around LANtastic's hardware and software for as little as $260 per node.
Oh man, that is LANtastic.
CJ, I have lots of questions. The LA fires for me have just enlightened me to how little I know about fire fighting technology.
Yes, fire bad.
There is so much going on in the world of fire technology, how we put out these fires and all of that. The scales have dropped from my eyes, and I now feel like I know nothing.
I, too, didn't know a lot. I've learned a lot about it over the past couple of weeks. It wasn't on my fucking bingo card for 2025.
Sure.
I am now more educated than the average bear about the things that we do to fight wildfires.
You actually had to evacuate.
I did.
Now, there's 3 levels. There's ready, set, and go.
Yes.
When you get to set, then you might start thinking, hey, it'd be easier to go now than it would be to wait for go.
Yeah, that's the new naming scheme. The original was ready, fire, aim, and they decided that wasn't great.
No, sure.
Yeah, no, it is ready, set, go, which basically set is the evacuation warning, which tells you that you might have to leave.
Yeah.
So be prepared. And then go means, surprisingly, go.
Go means you're going to go out in front of your house. There's going to be so much traffic, you're going to be spending hours just parked.
As a quick aside, it is amazing how most people, you put them under a little bit of stress. Like, go doesn't mean fire is here. It just means we need to get you out of the way in case fire is here.
Yeah.
People freak the fuck out. I watched people in my neighborhood pull out of their driveway, headlights not on, drive up a couple feet, stop, open a door, drive a couple more feet, stop. I'm like, what are you doing? You should not be operating a vehicle. I get you're stressed, but take a breath. Like, holy shit.
And that's just people who are in set. You never got to go, right?
So my exact neighborhood never got to go. We were go adjacent, and we were very close to go adjacent.
Yeah.
So a lot of my neighbors did evacuate out of an abundance of caution. You could argue the way that they drew the map was sort of like, they sort of didn't include my neighborhood. They're sort of just like, yeah, whatever. You guys got to do whatever in there. We're going to draw the map around you, which was mildly confusing.
Yeah, you do kind of poke out into a different zone.
Yeah. So it was so confusing that LAPD actually thought we were under mandatory evacuation, and they did come by to evacuate us. They did actually evacuate my whole neighborhood. The officers that came by were extremely kind and very, very nice. And I said, hey guys, orders haven't been issued.
Yeah.
And they said, well, yeah, we have our orders. And I pulled up the map and I pulled up the LAFD website where they actually issue the real fire orders.
Yeah.
And I said, you see, we're actually excluded. And the senior officer looked at me and he's like, command told us we had to evacuate you. And I'm like, I totally get it. Like, I'm not trying to argue with command right now, but like they just got it wrong.
It is a weird bump where you live, it's a little nodule that looks like you should be evacuated.
This is exactly how I describe it to my doctor. So they did evacuate us. They did police the neighborhood, put us under curfew. I'm glad they did. It did take some escalation to the mayor's office in order to get LAPD to correct that.
Yeah.
So, because you'd call CAL FIRE and CAL FIRE would say you are not under evacuation based on your address. I think it was a miscoordination. evacuation. Of course, my neighbors, a bunch of them were pissed because when we finally got it approved that it wasn't under evacuation and they let people back in, they're like, yeah, but they're not checking IDs anymore. I'm like, well, because we're not evacuated. I'm like, but we still want them to check IDs. And I'm like, we're not a fucking gated neighborhood, folks. You don't.
It's nice to have security you're not paying for.
I get it. I get it. Well, you're paying for it, just maybe not directly. But I was like, I get it, but you can't have both. Like, I know that would be nice, but that's not an option. It's like it would also be nice for them to bring me a pizza, but like that's not going to happen. Anyway,
backtrack just a little bit. Tell me what happens.
Yes.
First of all, you're noticing an enormous amount of air traffic above you.
Yeah.
So something's up.
So leading up to this, obviously, when we recorded last week, there was a fire that had already come out. The fire started in the Palisades on Tuesday. As the crow flies, the Palisades isn't far from me.
Yeah.
You can't really drive there in a reasonable amount of time because you have to go through West LA and buy a bunch of stuff. But fire doesn't give a shit. You have a whole bunch of brush that has not burnt in decades. So you had a lot of fuel up there. For the most part, because of where I live relative to where the fire was, you get something called the Santa Anas, which is an offshore breeze. So it's wind that blows from...
Winds blowing west from Santa Ana. They're
mainly
hot winds.
Mainly, yeah, south and to the west. They come out of the northeast typically. So from the warmer inlands, they're dry and they blow out to sea. So most of the fire was carried out towards sea. The smoke was carried out towards sea. That changed. So on Friday, that changed. We ended up getting a reversal in the wind. We had a slight wind to the east, which started bringing the fire closer to my house. And they then put up some evacuation warnings and evacuation zones, so some actual evacuation orders, basically to get people out of the path of the fire. For perspective, you had this fire encroaching on the communities of mainly like Encino, Tarzana, a smaller community called Mountain Gate, Bel Air to the west. These are all very populated communities that are, of a size similar to the Palisades that had already burnt. So you would just have seen massive destruction. They put a absolute ton of effort, they being the LAFD, into keeping that from happening. So I haven't been up there yet. I still can't get up there and so they don't want to interfere with their operations. But my understanding is that they bulldozed a fire break line around what's called Old Mulholland. So it's basically the dirt road version of Mulholland. This is an area that I've hiked and ridden my bike on, taken my kids to a bajillion times. So I know it pretty well. They bulldozed a huge path. I think it's on the order of 80 feet-ish or so wide for miles. And they then dropped fire retardant on it over and over and over again to basically get a stripe of sort of a protected fire break.
Just painting it red.
Yeah. I watched them do this because this air traffic goes right over my house.
Yeah.
And being anybody that's listened to this show for more than a couple episodes knows that I'm a bit of an airplane junkie. Just seeing all of this hardware fly over my house that I normally wouldn't see. Also flying like 1,500 feet above my house, like very, very low.
Giant aircraft flying way abnormally low.
Yeah. So that was fascinating to watch. And then you've got everything from smaller helicopters like Firehawks that are doing water drops to the giant Hercules, these large double Huey helicopters that are dropping water. And they literally just have like a little snorkel that drops down. They dip into the reservoir, lift up a bunch of water, then go over, drop it on the fire. I mean, it was incredible.
Lifting 40 gallons per second.
Yeah, something insane. Like, I mean, these guys, it's a 3,000 gallon helicopter that sucks up that entire 3,000 gallons in like 90 seconds.
It's amazing.
Anyway, this is all happening. I'm running out, taking pictures. I'm watching this all happen. At some point, and the fire started where they weren't sure if they were going to be able to hold it or not. They wanted to get people out of harm's way. So they evacuated basically everything to the west and to the south of me got evacuated. That was the weekend. That was exciting.
I watched you consistently on Watch Duty.
Oh, yeah. So Watch Duty, great app. They're a nonprofit that aggregates a bunch of these fire sources. They keep current. They assign I wouldn't say they're a reporter or a journalist, but they assign like an agent to listen to radio traffic and sort of keep tabs on everything and then post it into the app, which I thought was really cool. The majority of what they would post, I already knew minutes beforehand because I was also listening to like the command and control radio channels.
The actual traffic.
I mean, basically for 3 days straight, all I did was listen to LAFD command radio traffic and then watch the ADSB, so the flight information for all the planes and aircraft overhead. And that's all I did.
Great for you. For civilians, Watch Duty kind of does all that stuff for you. The delays are not big.
Yeah.
And you get everything in layers. You can turn off whatever layers you want, turn on whatever
Watch Duty is
really
great.
Fantastic.
There is a modicum of information that doesn't make it to Watch Duty. For example, they would call in when they'd have a report of a structure fire. They'll usually call it in to get it off the tactical channels. They'll call it into command so command knows.
Yeah.
So I have a text file that is just full of addresses and timestamps that I would type in as they'd call things in because I could see where the structure fire was to see if the fire was jumping. So mainly I was trying to determine, is it jumping closer to my my home is jumping closer to my friends' homes, like places of interest. And that was really interesting. There were a decent number of calls where they would get calls from civilians about fires. I would say the vast majority of them turn out to be false alarms. It's usually like someone's seen glare.
Yeah.
That's a little disappointing to me that they're wasting their effort on it, but I guess, you need to be more diligent. What is insane to me was the number of calls about drone flies that are in the area. So you have firefighters on the ground trying to coordinate airdrops, right? Airstrikes from helicopters, from tanker, large fixed wing aircraft, and they have drones in the air. There was an incident last week where
consumer drones. These are not people who are helping the firefighters. These are people who are taking their own footage.
So interestingly, there are certainly, the vast majority of them are civilians that are, flying drones to get pictures or whatever.
Fire department can fly anything they want. Civilians, it's really illegal for you to fly into those areas.
There was a call last week for a drone in the canyon, in Santa Monica Canyon. I happen to know this area pretty well because I used to live over there years ago. There was a drone flying around. So there was an LAPD chopper in the area. So one of the firefighters called it in to try to get a team over there to identify the drone and get them to pull it in. They did. It ended up being a Red Cross drone.
Oh, okay.
So Red Cross, like, again, an entity that you would think would be, I don't know, fucking coordinating and communicating.
Cleared, yes.
Was apparently flying a drone there, getting in the way of air traffic. Now, I'm assuming they may have coordinated with LAFD, and this was LAPD that was flying a helicopter in the area, but still, what the hell are you doing flying a drone in an aircraft laden area? But I digress. At one point, I saw an interview on KNBC. They had a guy that they were talking to, and he was literally demonstrating flying a drone to them to see the fires. And I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? It was at night. Yeah. They were still doing helicopter drops. It was the ridge behind him. I'm like, that thing needs to get turned off and thrown in the pool as quickly as possible.
At once.
But just beyond me. Like, I was super grumpy over that. And there was a strike. There was one of those Canadian scoopers that got hit by a drone, and it did a big dent on their wing because somebody was out there flying a drone while these guys were trying to do their job.
Took it out of service. We were supposed to be evacuated from those areas. You were not, but close to you was supposed to be evacuated. Yeah. They issue, even for people who may have stayed, who were supposed to evacuate, may have stayed, they've issued water boil alerts. And that's kind of an interesting thing, why the water gets contaminated.
You got a couple things going on. So to my knowledge, they initially had issued a couple of water boil alerts. They then changed those to do not drink. Yeah. So it went from a boil to a really don't use water. Those have not been in areas near me. Those have mainly been in the Palisades and in northern Santa Monica. The reason for the boil order is, I think, mainly from backflow. Yeah. So whenever you think about a high pressure and low pressure system, whenever you have, I think we talked about this last week, when the water pressure dips, you can get a situation where you get backflow. So you get water, especially with like irrigation systems. Imagine you've got a system of pipes that are in the ground. If the pressure dips, you can actually suck water from the ground back into the drinking system. That's bad. That's typically why you'll go to a water boil alert. Most homes, I don't know when this ordinance went into effect, but most homes now have to have what's called a backflow preventing valve. Yeah. So anywhere you have water outside of your home, anywhere that goes into the ground to fill your pool or whatever, there's a little backflow preventer so that if that happens, it basically breaks the suction so that you don't get this siphon effect running back into the water supply. When you get a massive fire like this, who freaking knows, right? Especially if you've got hoses coming out of fire hydrants. There's no backflow preventers on fire hydrants. Right. So if the water pressure dips, they could suck a bunch of nastiness back into the water supply.
You also get burned water meters and plastic pipes that contribute as the vacuum effect that pulls the gases back into the system from the open fire hydrants and the water storage tank vents.
All sorts of terribleness. These are all really, really nasty things. They'll get them sorted out. It's going to take a while, especially in the areas that are burnt.
You can't boil away those chemicals.
You can't boil it away, yeah. So I think that's when they switched from the boil order was more for water that had been contaminated, presumably from backflow, and then the do not use has been from everything else, like what you're talking about, the burnt plastic or things that were used in the firefighting process.
They'll get all that flushed out.
Oh, for sure. They have bigger problems right now. Right. But the other thing that I did that I've never really done before is I watched all of the daily briefings from the LAFD. These are not the press briefings. The press briefings aren't terribly interesting to me. I mean, you get some knowledge out of them, but the daily LAFD briefings are super interesting because you learn a lot about what their targets for the day are, what's happened over the past night. And these guys, I mean, they run a tight ship. They've got a human being assigned to every little aspect of the firefighting effort, everything from safety to supplies and supply orders. It was really interesting on command to hear them call in orders when they need like more hose or certain kinds of of, supplies, or things like porta potties and lunch. You don't think about that, but these guys need to fucking eat. So they're ordering porta potties or they're ordering lunch to a location so that a division can sustain themselves and operate. And that was pretty interesting. I never really thought about how that works.
Fire engines from Oregon.
Oh yeah. Fire engines from Oregon. Yeah. Unfortunately, the line online was that they didn't fucking make it because some bullshit about their emissions. So they got stuck in San Francisco. So first of all, this didn't happen. This was not a thing, but plenty of people thought that it did.
The fire engines got used.
Yes. The fire engines from Oregon came down here to fight the fire with the firefighters. Thank you. The belief was like, oh, well, California's got these ridiculous air quality standards. They wouldn't let them fight the fire because these fire trucks didn't meet emissions. I look at that and I go, that doesn't make sense to me. That doesn't sound plausible.
Because the fires don't meet emissions.
Yeah, the fires are actually not very emission compliant, as it turns out either. But what's really more bananas to me are the people that start these stories. Like they're so hungry for attention. Like I don't know why you would do that. There's another one, the Detroit Lions. I'm from Detroit. You've heard me plug the Detroit Lions here on the show. Several people have contacted me and said, "Oh man, I heard the Lions donated $50 million to the fund. That's awesome." And I'm like, yeah, no. Like again, just enough to go, $50 million is a lot of money. Like that's a lot of money even for the Lions.
For a small market football team, that's a lot of money.
Does not make sense to me. So I start Googling around and all I can find is that the NFL has built a consortium of several teams and they've donated $5 million to the relief effort, which by the way is awesome and amazing. Thank you, NFL. But I couldn't find any mention of the Lions. Then I started digging around and I find some social media posts. I find some site that's cosplaying as a news website. It's not. But somebody wrote a fucking story that cites a press release from the Detroit Lions and cites quotes from their quarterback saying they donated this money. Someone made up a whole bunch of shit. They didn't just make a meme and post it on Instagram. Yeah. They actually made up a story and put it. I'm like, why would you do this? Are you trying to get ad traffic to spike? Are you trying to make $50? Is that really what we're going for here? What's your real end game that made you sit down and write this? It didn't strike me as something that came out of ChatGPT. It struck me as something somebody actually wrote and put up and made the graphic and did the thing. And I'm like, why? What? Do you just want to watch the world burn? Is that it? You just really just want to be and then I go, well, they're currently the darlings of the NFL. Are they trying to bait them into it? Because now, what are the Lions going to say officially? Oh yeah, but sorry, we didn't get fucked. We didn't donate any money. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Well, they can. It's fine if they do. I mean, you want to tell the truth.
Who had, Detroit donating money to help Los Angeles on any version of your bingo card for any year? Sure. I don't think that was a thing. There's just misinformation everywhere. And we can talk about that ad nausea, but people saying that there's no water and there's no water in the reservoirs and the hydrants ran dry.
Well, the hydrants did run dry. There is truth to the hydrants running dry.
Yes.
Not because we lacked water, but because we lacked power to pump the water up to the hills so we could have water pressure.
There were moments where there wasn't water available.
And there was so much water being used that the pressure, that helps the pressure drop down too.
The best quotes I've seen on this have been from fire chiefs that said no water system in the country would have been able to support this.
Of course.
You need perspective on how bad this is. And folks, they ask the wrong questions. They go, well, did you have enough fire engines? Do you have enough fire resources? And their responses have been, no.
No one does.
Of course we didn't have enough fire engines. We would need 3 engines per house. 8,000 houses have burnt. Yeah. So we need about 24,000 engines. There's not that many in the entire state.
There's nothing of this scale.
There's a reasonable number of people that have texted me and said things like, well, this is all just bad governance. And I'm like, how? What's been bad about the governance? Educate me. Tell me. And they have no fucking answers.
Where would you park all those fire engines when they're not in use? Where would you even put them?
It makes no sense. And by the way, none of you people saying this would have wanted to pay for it. Nobody wants to pay for the abundance of protection.
Sure.
For the what if event, right? We can barely get what we get now. My point is, it's not logistically feasible. The comments around bad governance, nobody has been able to answer for me. So if somebody's got a good bad governance argument, please send it my way, because I'd like to know what that is. From my perspective, they've done an amazing job managing this, right? You would have expected there to be a lot more pissing matches and arguing back and forth when you have this sort of stressful event.
Sure.
And here, I feel like it's been managed really well. And I don't know what I would have them do differently. Can it be better? I'm certain it can be better. I'm certain there are learning lessons to be learned from the most devastating fire we've pretty much ever seen in modern California. But that doesn't mean that they should have somehow known what to do to make it better.
There will be reports, there will be debriefs, they will go over everything anything, we will learn things for sure.
They pumped water into reservoirs that otherwise normally don't hold water, planning for this. They had crews stationed ready to go. They had aero fleets fueled, ready to go.
There was one reservoir that was empty when this happened, and it was because it was under maintenance. And that's going to happen. You are going to have to maintain reservoirs.
How dare you maintain these things?
It happened that a fire broke out when that was happening. So that happens.
So it's bananas. And then the other thing from every single person that I've seen that has claimed, bad governance, and I was like, okay, what are you doing to make it better? Like, what are you really doing other than just bitching about it or propagating some news that isn't actually real? What are you doing? Because all those things just make it worse.
Yeah.
Do you want to run for office? Do you want to try to help solve the problem? Oh, no, I don't do any of that. Like, I expect my elected officials to. Okay, they are. Like, that's my response to them, is that they are. But I'm very impressed. These guys are fighting the fires. You've got convicts up there that are in prison. They're up there fighting fires. They don't have to. It's not forced, but they elect to. They're usually they're not holding. My understanding is they're not holding hoses. They're doing all the real backbreaking work, right? All the digging, all the clearing out of brush and whatnot. And these dudes saved a good chunk of the city. Yeah. I have several friends in the Palisades that have lost their homes, and it's absolutely heartbreaking and terrible. This was an event that I don't think anyone could have stopped. I don't think there could have been a better job done once that fire started. If you look at the videos of the wind that was ripping through there, there's no way you could have stopped it in its tracks.
Yeah, when you get 100-mile-an-hour plus gusts, there's no preparing for that. Let's talk a little bit more about more technological things. Yeah. There is this substance that they are dropping, and it is red, and it is fire magic. You can put
marinara sauce.
I think it is.
Ragu.
No matter where you drop it, the fire magically just goes away. Yeah. And if you drop it on soil where there's no fire, the fire doesn't go near the soil. Yeah. I mean, how does that work? So what is that?
The stuff that Jeff's alluding to, this fire retardant, is typically the brand name they use most of for this is called Phos-Chek.
Phos-Chek, yeah.
I made an assumption that this shit was terrible.
Everybody says this is so toxic. If it gets in your car, it just melts your car down to nothing.
It's got to be, because it stops fire. Like, it's got to be terrible. And it's so effective at stopping the fire.
And there's 15 years of repercussions of putting this into the soil.
And we're all going to die, and everyone's going to have stunted growth, and your kids are like Oompa Loompas. And then I went and actually, did something that apparently most people don't know how to do, which was I did a little bit of research, not on Facebook.
Before you do research, think about this. This is California in 2025.
Yeah.
I can tell you it's not going to be a highly toxic substance that they're using.
Here's why I didn't go down that path in my brain initially. Because I feel like when shit is on fire, literally, all bets are off.
The fire is more toxic than anything you're going to bring into it, most likely.
Like if I called CARB and said, hey, look, I got good news and bad news. The good news is I got a machine that can put the fire out. The bad news is two-stroke and it burns a bunch of oil.
Sure.
CARB's going to be like, fucking go for it, right?
Sure.
Like, so I feel like all bets are off. So I just made this assumption that this red stuff that just stops fire in its tracks has to be super toxic and super bad.
In this case, we've used it for years. We've had a lot of time to think about it and what it's formulated with.
So I am no expert on this, but I did a decent amount of research, including the aggregated research of Wikipedia. And I read the SDS reports on this Phos-Chek. There's not one Phos-Chek substance. There are several. Depends on the application. Depends on how long you want it to last.
Flavors, yes.
Yeah, there's definitely several flavors. The bubblegum's my favorite. And I went through them, and I was fucking shocked, because when you read through it, you look at what's in it, you go, oh, that doesn't sound great. It doesn't sound terrible. It doesn't sound great. And then you get through the list of like its toxicity, and there's almost none. Yeah. The one thing that it's known to do is wreak havoc on aquatic ecosystems because it's a phosphate.
Algae blooms, yeah.
So you get like algae super blooms, which is true, I think, of any phosphate that gets into the water supply. But when you're hauling it, like from a hazardous perspective, it's a zero on all fronts. Obviously, it's not flammable. Right. And then here's the one that when I saw this, I was like, oh shit. Okay, I can make tea out of this stuff. If you've, been to California, or if you've been on social media and listened to all the people that bitch about California, we have something called Prop 65, which requires you to label any substance that might contain chemicals, or anything that might contain chemicals that could cause cancer or reproductive harm.
Almost every restaurant has somewhere in it a Prop 65 warning for something.
So, for example, the tailpipe emissions from your car are known to cause cancer. So, if you're in a parking garage, they'll have a sign up that says Prop 65 warning. If you're in this garage, there are chemicals that could be in this garage that could cause cancer. Now, if you buy just about anything off of Amazon these days, it has a Prop 65 warning, which I could argue certainly has made Prop 65 less effective.
You get used to it. Yeah.
Everything has it. So you're just like, well, everything's got it. So you get used to it. And we can have that debate for another day. Here's what's amazing about Phos-Chek. I read through the SDS, and it has this language that I really wish they would put in a bigger font and bold on the bottom, where they say that Phos-Chek does not contain any chemicals known to the state of California to cause cancer, developmental, and or reproductive harm.
Yeah.
It's the only fucking thing in the state that doesn't cause cancer, development, or reproductive harm.
That doesn't require a Prop 65 warning.
We should have this as for breakfast. Like, this stuff is fucking lovely. So I'm really impressed by this. And then you talk about, again, going back to my current grumpiness about the quote failure of governance.
Sure.
Okay, Phos-Chek mixes at about the ratio of 1 pound of Phos-Chek to 1 gallon of water. So roughly speaking, you need a pound per gallon. We were running some of the biggest air tankers for firefighting that I believe exist in the world.
Backtrack. The DC-10 holds 9,600 gallons.
9,400 gallons. Let's call it 9,000-ish gallons. A lot.
An enormous amount of liquid.
A lot. It's a swimming pool. It's a small swimming pool in the air. And they'll drop this down, lay a strip that's 3/4 of a mile or a mile long.
They'll
right?
do 15 drops in a day. They'll just paint these huge lines.
So we had all these tankers dropping all of this fire retardant coming out of basically 2 airports in Southern California. And I was thinking about, okay, how much of this Phos-Chek do they need? You know, you're talking about a pound per gallon, give or take.
It's a lot of Phos-Chek.
One of these planes is dropping 9,000 gallons of water. I'm assuming it gets bigger as you mix it. So that's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 5, 6, 7, 8,000 pounds of phosphate that goes into one drop.
Yeah.
And now you're talking about 25, 30, 40 drops a day. And I start doing the math and I'm like, holy shit, you must have had thousands of pounds, tens of thousands of pounds of this Phos-Chek sitting around somewhere.
Karen Bass stores it in her garage. She's a very thoughtful mayor.
Hoarding it. She's hoarding it. Karen Bass is hoarding all the Phos-Chek to put out fires around her house. I mean, what's bananas about this is like that all existed and was somewhere with some giant mixing apparatus. Supposedly this Phos-Chek, so it's now managed by a company called Perimeter Solutions. They have these MRB units that do the mixing. These things can support up to 50,000 gallons per hour, which is
crazy.
Bananas, right? Like I want to go see this in effect because I'm just mesmerized by that. So all of this lack of governance, all this poor planning, somehow they still managed to figure out how to get the fucking Phos-Chek there and the mixing device. And I watch these airplanes, man, they would go touchdown at Lancaster and they'd be back in the air in like 4, 5, 6 minutes. And I'm like, how do you even get that done that fast?
Friend asked a question. I said I would try to answer it. She said,
I didn't start it.
You didn't?
No.
But somebody is suing SoCal Edison. There's already a lawsuit.
Of course someone is.
For the Eaton fire for SoCal Edison.
Of course.
Do you think these massive fires could trigger a recession? LA was already dealing with a housing crisis and construction costs have increased significantly since COVID. The biggest number I've heard so far in damage is around $50 billion. It's an enormous amount of money, but that will be coming in from insurance companies. So most likely LA is going to be awash in an inflow of insurance money. So it's unlikely we'll get recession.
Yeah.
I would fear more we would get inflation. You're going to get what you're going to get. You don't get upset. But that's what's going to happen.
I'm assuming that you're going to have access to building materials is going to become very difficult and expensive. Access to anybody that can swing a hammer or help rebuild.
There will be labor shortages. Amazing. But there'll be people who were gardeners yesterday.
Yeah.
Those houses have now burned down.
Yeah.
They're going to go learn how to hang drywall.
Totally.
That's a natural economic shift.
You're also going to have a bunch of folks coming in from out of state to help build.
Of course.
Hopefully of non-dubious quality, but who knows?
You go where the work is.
You go where the work is. So I would argue that, I'm with you. I think it's the opposite of a recession. You have a bunch of money that's going to flow in.
Which is why you will get inflation, because the demand, the dollars chasing these limited resources will cause inflation.
I mean, there was no like fixed industry that I know of in either of the areas that burnt the heaviest. So Altadena and the Palisades, it's not like you had a bunch of like clothing manufacturing or something there that was going to put a big dent. What you have is a bunch of people that, lost their homes and their lives are completely disrupted.
Sure.
I just don't know where they're all going to go. I mean, the numbers are still hovering in the single digit thousands. The very rudimentary math I've done is that it's a lot more than that. I think they just haven't confirmed it, but I think you're talking about tens of thousands of structures that are end up ultimately being lost, which means you're talking about tens of thousands of people, right? Upwards of maybe 30, 40, 50,000 people.
Pretend there's at least 3 people in every structure on average.
Exactly. You're going to have tens of thousands of people that have nowhere to live.
Yeah.
And we already have a housing crisis here. So, and it's going to be hard if you currently live your life in Altadena to move somewhere far away, or like even the Palisades is probably even a better example because there's not a lot of places to go that are near the Palisades, right? I mean, there's almost nothing to the north and west. You go to the east, it's Santa Monica and West LA. That's some of the most desirable places to live in the country. So those folks, like their lives, they can't go live in Sun Valley. Like that's a completely different life for them from in terms of access to if they've got an office,
their work,
or a job, or their kids, or whatever.
Right.
That's all going to be super tough.
People who are used to working out of office, though, they'll be able to move around to some degree.
Yeah.
The fact that we had COVID preceding this probably is going to help us a little bit economically because we kind of know a little bit how to do this.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive how much like they've got these logistics figured out.
I want to mention one more thing before we go.
Please.
Metro was free, which was great. We had a week where Metro was free.
So cool.
You could hop on the bus. Or
Metro was free. Uber and Lyft, I think, gave in free rides to shelters. And I think even the amount of the community that has come out to say, hey, we're here. We're going to figure this out together. People just coming out to help strangers. That I really frustrates me to see how much of that is tarnished by people bitching about bad governance or so-and-so didn't do the blah, blah right. I'm like, there's so many people trying to help this recovery that it diminishes that story. And that's really super frustrating to me. I mean, people have lost their homes. Some people have lost their life. And now you've got folks just coming together, don't know each other, just coming together saying like, I'm here for you. Like, I got you. I'm going to try to help you however I can. And that's been impressive. In a town like LA, where I find myself often going, nobody knows each other. There's no community. You just cut somebody off. Who cares? Flip them off. Fuck them. Who cares? And now you're like, oh, no. People
There's
actually.
a lot of community here.
They get this shit together. Yeah,
people pull together. Yeah, it was great.
It's pretty impressive.
Some of those parking lots, the Santa Anita one that was where they asked for donations, bring donations here, and people, if you need things, come and get them. They eventually were just like, okay, no more donations.
Yeah, please don't bring them here. We're full.
We have so much stuff. Yeah. That was wonderful.
Also, like during the fire, I can't reiterate this enough. The amount of support for putting this thing out. At one point, I had 2 DC-10s over my house constantly. 2 MD-87s. These are large aircraft over my house constantly. C-130s from Cal Fire. More helicopters than I can count.
Yeah.
Colson Industries has these double Huey helicopters. The ones I was mentioning earlier that can suck up, 3,000 gallons of water. Just running non-stop.
Yeah.
Like it was incredible how much resource.
A lot of very technologically sophisticated personnel required.
High skilled, and I mean, and these guys were operating like it was just like a watch. Like they were just boom, boom, boom. I'm listening to the air traffic. There's no one in there bitching about don't worry, shit got screwed up for sure. They handled it like professionals. They dealt with it. They figured it out. And I was super impressed with that. And just using all of this modern kit from radios to air tankers and helicopters and sucking up water from the reservoirs to dump on it. The Canadian planes that would just go scoop into the ocean. Like
it's amazing.
How can you look at that and go, this isn't amazing? Like, these guys just go dip into the water.
This is not to say we don't have sympathy for people who suffered loss.
Of course.
The responders, they're heroes, and how much we know how to do now and the technology that we have to aid us is really mind-blowing.
It's incredible. By the way, slightly lighter aside, people were like, when this is happening, people were like, well, what's your plan? I'm like, what do you mean, what's my plan? Like, well, what's your plan for the fire? Which I think is kind of silly. Like, my plan is get the fuck out of here, let my house burn. I'm not going to die holding a garden hose.
Right.
Like, that's not going to happen.
There was a man who did.
I'd respond with it, and I was just like, well, I emptied everything out of the egg. I'll just climb inside one of the big green eggs. It'll be fine. And then, there'd be this, long pause, and I'm like, they 100% think I'm serious. What better place to stay cool than inside a big green egg, right?
Well, people said, put things inside your barbecue, and they will survive. I don't know if that's true or not, but people were saying that.
And the other one is people are like, well, I got everything I've got is in my safe. It'll be fine. And I'm like,
no.
Fine how? And they're like, well, it's all in there. I'm like, well, first of all, it's made out of anything that's not metal. It's going to melt.
Sure.
I don't see the inside of a lot of people's safes, but inside their safes, they'll have CDs. I'm like, well, what are you doing? Like, oh, it's backed up my data or, hard drives. I'm like, those are going to fucking melt.
Right, sure.
Like, this is not a strategy. Even paper can ignite inside your safe. You hope that it's sealed well. There's not getting a lot of oxygen, but it's going to get hot as shit inside there.
I kept thinking, I'm going to use the pool. I'm going to put stuff in plastic trash bags, sink it to the bottom of the pool.
Yeah, sure.
And if it survives, great. If it doesn't, it wasn't going to survive before I put it in the pool. So why not try?
Yeah.
It's amazing in the moment, all the terrible ideas that you have. But you have to kind of filter through them and go, is this feasible? Could I do that? What would I do here?
Sure.
There were companies that put out lists, which I thought was fascinating. What to grab if you have only 5 minutes.
Yeah.
What to grab if you have 15 minutes.
Yeah.
What to grab if you have a half an hour. And those lists I thought were really useful.
Super smart. I was very impressed with how little things I actually want.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Or need. It's really not that much.
Most of my life is replaceable in a single Amazon delivery.
Yeah, pretty true.
There are sentimental things, but I can live without the sentimental. I could move on. The things that I need, I could get new things.
The only thing that I regretted not taking, and this is a very, very small amount of regret, is there is a board that we measure the kids' heights at every couple of months.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's a non-replaceable thing. And if that's the one thing that survives from our house, that'd be kind of cool. But I was like, I ain't going back for it. Fuck that.
No, sure.
My biggest takeaways from this are kind of reinforcing things that I already suspected and I think have grown to know. Like, one, the information is out there. If you so choose to get accurate information, you can get it.
Yeah.
I didn't need any special equipment other than a computer. I could do it all on a phone.
Yeah, sure.
To get the LAFD command radios. And I didn't use a scanner. I used it online. I got an online interface so I could walk around, have it in my headset on my phone when I'm walking around the house doing stuff.
Yeah.
Air maps, all available online for free.
Yeah.
All of the briefings, the actual daily briefings briefings available online for free. The information is there. The problem is what's not there is the desire to actually know the truth.
Yeah, sure.
I'd argue that that's a more common thing these days, where it's like, it's so much better to just have somebody on Instagram tell me in a funny reel with a little graphic and some background noise. But so many of these things I go, well, that just doesn't sound right. That doesn't sound real.
It's incendiary, or it's promoting a political agenda, or sure.
Yeah, you want some clicks, right? You want some views.
Yeah.
Like, how do you go to bed at night? Like, you go to bed at night and just go, oh yeah, I made some shit up, but I got an extra 3 cents out of YouTube, but happy days.
Right.
So the point being is, like, the internet, the version that I talk about here that we all desired 20, 30 years ago, it is still there. You still can go find the truth.
Yeah.
You just have to disseminate. You got to go through it and like have a decent amount of skepticism and just think logical and don't fall into the, well, that fits what I want to believe.
Right.
And then like magically the answer just presents itself in front of me. I found that a lot, especially under panic. Most people fall into fight or flight. I'm definitely the fight guy, not the flight guy. So people will just, when they're seeing this information, this barrage of information, they're like, well, I heard the blah, blah, blah. I heard it was arson. I'm like,
I heard the Detroit Lions gave $50 million.
$50 million. Like, how amazing. I'm like, okay, what's the source? I want to be an agent of change. I want to make things better. But by calling people out on this shit, now people just say it to me less.
Sure.
I know they still believe it. I haven't really changed anybody's opinion. They just don't say it to me anymore. So, okay, well, I guess I don't have to listen to it. I guess then, I haven't been an agent of change. And I don't want to tell you don't believe everything that you read, because that's not the right answer. But be critical of what you're reading. Is like, just
choose your sources carefully.
Choose your sources. Sure. Yeah. And be skeptical of the source. But then this is where you get into the like, well, academia now, they're all in the pocket of blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, really?
Not so much.
Like, go meet some of those scientists. Tell me they're in the fucking pocket of so-and-so. Like, okay, I'm a fan of science.
There have been cases of where there's been a small number of scientists who are in the pocket
of course.
But it doesn't mean the mass majority are. The vast majority are legitimately, sincerely trying to find the truth.
You have a peer review process of a bunch of people that have knowledge on the same thing.
Yeah.
That is the answer, right? That is the best answer we have so far, is you assume the mass group of folks that have been trained in whatever, astrophysics or chemistry, virology, they're going to come together and find a consensus of what they believe to be the right answer.
Yeah.
But of course, the counter programming to that is, well, they're all in it together. It's all a conspiracy. Okay, why? What's the goal? Blah. Control the world. Great. You're doing great.
Big Fozcheck is trying to get them in their way.
Big Foz. Okay, funny you fucking say that. In my research for this, do you know who used to own Fozcheck in the 60s?
No.
Fucking Monsanto.
Oh, I'm sure.
Monsanto used to own.
By the way, what Fozcheck is made of has probably changed over time too. Probably when Monsanto owned it,
course.
Who knows what was in it?
Asbestos.
Sure. Be very effective at putting out a fire.
Just asbestos all the way down. Meanwhile, the Monsanto guy's like, we should really get away from this asbestos stuff. And they're like, why? Great. You're wrong.
All right, we have to get out of here, but quickly before we do, have you seen or read anything good this last week?
Look, I feel like I let our listeners down every single week in this particular part of the close.
Sure.
This week will be no different. I have spent all of the past week watching air traffic move around on a fucking map.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, is not the most boring thing you've ever seen. I'm sure it's better than half the things on Netflix.
No, and it's important. It tells you so much about what's happening right now.
Totally. All the LAFD staff briefings, right? Like, this is all in tactical command is what I've been listening to.
Yeah.
I don't think it's something that's really repeatable. I will say that some of the ADSB, the airplane data, people have done a really cool job animating it.
I love that.
Speeding it up so you can see it. That's kind of neat. I'll put some of those links in. I think that's worth looking at.
It's fascinating to see how all that stuff works.
I have gone and looked at video of the aftermath, right? The destruction that's there, to just sort of give me some perspective at how temporary this all is.
Sure.
Like fire is a wicked beast.
Don't get too attached to your things.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I love my stuff, but I don't love it that much.
Right.
I'm not like I said, you're not going to find me here at my house with a hose in my hand.
No, maybe
I mean, you might. It's just not going to be death from fire. It'll just be the death from the brisket heart attack that I'm likely to get while I'm trying to put out a fire on my green eggs.
Something's going to get you one way or the other.
Something's going to get me. Yeah, it's probably the good money's on brisket. That's really the good money. And I mean, and just I'll say at the end, looking at all these videos, there are so many places that I used to go to often
that are gone
now.
Yeah.
And when I lived in Santa Monica, there were a bunch of places in the Palisades I used to go to often, and they're gone. And that is tough.
It's sad.
Anyway, that's my bummer. Have you seen?
You know what's cool?
What's that?
The new places that are going to replace them.
Totally. I get it. I get turn the crank.
I mean, it's going to be great.
I am shocked how few people have died in this thing. I know we're still finding some folks.
Yeah,
but
sure.
For this amount of destruction and for the evacuations who have worked, worked and for Genesis to have worked in mass notifications. I am super impressed at how well they have managed this.
For destruction on this scale.
It's incredible. Anyway, how about you? What have you seen?
I'm going to recommend a little video about the Pasadena Humane Society on YouTube. They've been receiving donations for over 400 animals that they have rescued from the Los Angeles wildfires. Check out the video, and if you can, please send a donation. Wow, these people, there are heroes among us everywhere.
That's amazing.
I'll put the link in the show notes.
I'll have to give that a watch.
That is the episode.
Thank you for joining us for all of this nonsense, a truly terrible podcast from The Awful Company. Visit us on the web at nonsense.productions. I'm Stu Little.
I'm Jeff Parker.
If you like this program, please follow, download, subscribe, and like at Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, Amazon Music, AntennaPod, iHeartRadio, Spotify, my favorite, Overcast, wherever you may get your podcasts from.
Nonsense uses Signal Messenger. There's no such thing as secure messaging on software that is not open source. Signal, strongly encrypted open source messaging. Check it out. Special thanks to our floor director, Gary Miller.
Thanks, Gary. We'll be here every Thursday morning for more nonsense. Please join us.
Hit it, Hal. Gooey, gooey, rich and chewy inside. Golden, flaky, tender, cakey outside. Wrap the inside in the outside. Is it good? Darn tootin'. Doing the big Newton. Here's the tricky part. The big Newton. One more time. The big